What is psychology? In this video, you'll be provided with an overview of what psychology is and how psychologists study behavior.
Let's take some time to look at what psychology is. If we look at the word psychology, we see that there are two parts to it. There is psyche, which means soul, and ology, which means the study of. So a literal translation of the word psychology would be the study of the soul. For those of you who have taken a mythology course, you may recognize the name Psyche. Psyche was the goddess of the soul. She was the wife of Eros, who was the god of love. And Psyche was a mortal princess who had this extraordinary beauty. And because of this beauty, Aphrodite was very upset. And especially as men were giving Psyche a lot of extra attention and not paying as much attention to Aphrodite. And so what Aphrodite did is she commanded Eros to make Psyche fall in love with the most unattractive of men. And the story is very interesting. And if you've not read it, I would encourage you to do so. So the scientific study of the human mind and behavior is how we define psychology. And as you'll be learning in this module, you'll learn that psychologists study everything from how the brain works to consciousness to memory. Psychologists are interested in studying language and reasoning, how we develop personality, how we develop throughout the lifespan, how we develop psychological disorders, why we develop them, in other words, who tends to develop them, what creates vulnerability, and how they can be treated. How can we lead people to live more productive lives? In other words, I don't mean productive in the sense that they're producing and doing things, but in the way that people feel as though they are reaching their potential, that they are being mindful. And so we'll be looking at that in this particular. So what is the first thing you think of when you hear the word psychology? Go ahead and pause this video if you need time to think. So the word empirical means originating in or based on observation or experience. It's something that can be verified through observation or experiment. And sometimes we call the overall framework for this empiricism, meaning it's not just based on some passing thought, but it's based on actual data. Psychologists use the scientific method, which means it's empirical and it's based on data. And now some of our behavior has its roots in biology, and there's some biological aspects. So you'll notice that psychology has some relationship with the natural sciences. But we're also human beings that are living in a social world. And in that way, psychology is very much a part of the social sciences as well. But to answer psychological questions, psychologists use the scientific method, which includes things like observation and experimentation that you'll learn about in the next module. Psychologists use critical thinking.
So what have you learned? In this review, you learned about the scientific study of psychology. You learned about empiricism and about the approach that psychologists use to study behavior. In the next video, we'll begin to learn about the history of psychology.